eyes and my caught on my lipstick. Hi friends, my name is Katie. Welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited to talk with you guys today about my middle grade March TBR as well as some recommendations. I have read books from every single one of these categories, but I'm afraid to say I don't feel like my list is exhaustive. However, I have already seen recommendations videos going up from other people participating, people who've participated over the last couple years. So I would encourage all of you, if you're looking for recommendations, to just search middle grade March. Go check out Krista's video because it's also going up today. And also check out Amanda from The Curly Reader. She put up a recommendations video last week where she goes through every single one of the challenges and lists a ton of recommendations. And she has excellent taste, and she has read so many middle grade books, both because she loves middle grade and also because she has kids who are middle grade readers, and so she's read aloud a lot of books to her kids. So while I have recommendations, there's a lot of other recommendations out there, so I really think that you should go watch other people's videos because they are so good and it makes me so excited. Before I get into the recommendations that I have and my own TBR, I need to tell you who won the giveaway. Her screen name is Chris Van Earwidge. I responded to her comment on my last video, on my announcement video, but I haven't heard back. So Chris, if you're watching this video, you won the giveaway. So please email me, lifebetweenwords@gmail.com, or you can find me on Instagram. Maybe to start, I will remind you that our group pick, our group read for middle grade March is The Book of Boy by Catherine Gilbert Murdoch. This book won the Newbery Honor. It is a medieval adventure tale about a little boy who's just called Boy in the book. I can't promise, since I have not read it myself, that it is going to live up to our last two middle grade March group picks, Sweep and The Girl Who Drank the Moon, but it does come highly recommended, so hopefully, crossing my fingers, it will be a good one. Before I tell you my TBR though, I'm going to give you some recommendations for each of the challenges, and then I'll tell you what I'm reading for each of the challenges and the other books that I'd like to read during the month. So if you're curious to know what I'm going to read and don't want recommendations first, just skip to the end and then end the video or then come back to the beginning, however you want to do it. I'm just letting you know that my TBR is at the end of this video. Probably one of the easiest challenges to fulfill, because some of them are definitely a little harder, a book with illustrations. Tons of middle grade books have illustrations, if not throughout the book, at least for the chapter headings. But I'm going to mention a few that I've read where the illustrations are kind of scattered throughout the book. The first I'm going to recommend is almost any book by Kate DiCamillo, but in particular The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane, which has the most beautiful illustrations. Like, for instance, I don't know if you can see, but the illustrations are gorgeous, and the story it tells is also wonderful. It's about a little China rabbit, like a China doll, but a China rabbit. He's very vain, not that he's unkind, but he's extremely vain, and he ends up accidentally falling overboard on a ship and losing the little girl that he is owned by, and then he goes on an adventure through all these different homes who find him. This is one of my favorite Kate DiCamillo books. So if you haven't read Kate DiCamillo, this is a really wonderful place to start, and like I said, illustrations are gorgeous. Another great Kate DiCamillo option with illustrations would be Flora and Ulysses. This won the Newbery Medal. It's not quite graphic novel, but there's lots of pages that are sort of graphic novel format, and then others where there's, you know, regular print, regular prose. This is probably my least favorite Kate DiCamillo, even though it won the Newbery, but that shouldn't stop you from reading it because Kate DiCamillo is wonderful, so even her worst book is still excellent. Speaking of graphic novel, this is a book that I don't own, but I would probably like to. The 2019 Newbery Medal winner was a book called New Kid by Jerry Craft. It is the first graphic novel to win the Newbery Medal. I'm so excited to read it. I've heard that it's wonderful and deals with really timely topics, specifically issues surrounding race and ethnicity. This little boy who is black, who's starting at a new school that's predominantly white. A book that I'm going to end up mentioning a few times here because it fits a few of the different challenges is Pages & Co. by Anna James. This book is filled with illustrations, like there's an illustration, but it also plays with some of the text. I don't know if you can see this, but like, I don't know if this is going to focus. On this page, the text is a little cattywampus, and then there's also a little illustration in the corner. So, and this is also a really great book that will fit the next challenge as well, which I'll get into in a minute. Just real quick, this is about a little girl named Tilly whose family has the ability to step into the novels that they sell in their bookshop. It's very adventurous and just really imaginative and wonderful. I have 2 books by Katherine Applegate that also fit the challenge of reading a book with illustrations, and that's The One and Only Ivan and Wish Tree. Wish Tree has to do with a tree that takes it upon itself to find a friend for a little Muslim girl who lives in its neighborhood. It's a really, really beautiful story of friendship and community. The One and Only Ivan, which also won the Newbery Medal. This is about a gorilla named Ivan who's kind of a sideshow gorilla, really mistreated, and takes care of a little elephant that lives in the cage next to him. It's also a really beautiful story of friendship, and it's based on a true story, and this one will also show up in a later challenge. Next is the challenge to read a book about books or stories. Now, you could take this to mean a retelling, and there's plenty of retellings out there. Just Google retellings. But I specifically wanted to recommend books that are about books, because that's a very particular type of story, right? So the first that I wanted to talk about, I've already talked about, and that's Pages & Co., because this is a book about a little girl who can step into the stories of books. Similarly, years ago, and I don't have a copy of this book, but I have read it and I really loved it at the time, is Inkheart by Cornelia Funke. I think that's how you pronounce her name. Maybe I've just watched a little too much Arrested Development, but that is also about a little girl who can step into stories. And then maybe a little bit of a stretch, but it still works, is Echo by Pam Munoz-Ryan. This book also fits a few of the challenges, but the main story is sandwiched between sort of a fairy tale. And so in many ways it is a story about stories, because this fairy tale, this story being told in the middle, has to do with this fairy tale that bookends the main plot. This is one of my favorite middle grades. It's a World War II historical fiction novel, and it tells 3 individual stories that do all end up having a point of connection, but it tells the stories in 3 different locations. One of the stories takes place in Germany, and then 2 of the stories take place in the United States, but different parts of the United States. And then weaving its way through these 3 stories is sort of a magical harmonica. And like I said, this fairy tale that bookends the main plot. It sounds confusing. It's really not, and it's a beautiful, beautiful story. A book that I haven't read, but also fits this challenge, is a book called Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Library, which is also a mystery, so that fits the next challenge. I don't know much about Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Library, although it's been on my radar for years, so I can't really tell you a whole lot about it, but I can tell you that it fits this challenge, and it does get high ratings on Goodreads. Next, we're going to talk about mysteries. Personally, I have not read many middle grade mysteries, but I do have a few that I can mention, a couple of which I haven't read in years and years. I have a feeling I would still love them though. So the first that I want to talk about is The Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil Frankweiler, which is definitely a mystery and a little bit of an adventure story. The thing that I remember loving the most about it when I was a kid is the little girl who sets out to solve this mystery runs away and stays and like hides out in the Met in New York City, and it is just so wonderful. So I remember loving that book when I was a kid. I would actually love to reread it. Then there also is Harriet the Spy. That would be considered a mystery, right? She's not really a spy, but she does sort of end up stumbling into an accidental mystery that she then tries to solve. That's my memory of the book. Once again, it's been years since I've read Harriet the Spy, another middle grade book that I would love to reread because it was a favorite when I was a kid. A book that I haven't read, but is quite popular on BookTube, is a book called Winter House. I can't tell you anything about this book because I haven't read it and I didn't even look at the synopsis, but it is a mystery, so it does work for this plot or for this challenge. And then one more book that I haven't read is a book called The Scandalous Sisterhood of Prick Willow Place. And this, I think, is sort of a Victorian mystery about a group of girls at a boarding house. I think something like their headmistress dies and there's some sort of mystery surrounding that. I really don't know, but it's a book that I have had on my radar for a long time and would love to read. The next challenge is a book set in another country. For this challenge, I wish that I had books to recommend that I'd read that were outside of sort of the Western Hemisphere, and I really don't have many, and that makes me feel kind of sad. I'd like to give myself the challenge of finding more books set outside of those countries, European countries in particular, but for now, it is what it is. So the books that I do have to recommend are, once again, Echo. One of the stories in this book takes place in Germany, so there's that one. Similarly, there's The War That Saved My Life, which takes place in England. This is another World War II historical fiction novel. It's excellent, about a little girl with a clubbed foot whose mother is abusive. She ends up escaping during the bombing raids and goes to live, like many children did, outside of London in sort of a country town, or in one of the cities outside of London. It is a beautiful, beautiful story that I highly recommend. Similarly, there's Sweep, the Story of a Girl and Her Monster. This takes place in Victorian London about a little girl who's a chimney sweep and her soot monster. This was our group pick for last year, and it was another incredible read, so if you haven't read this one, highly recommend. But I also want to mention an author that has written a lot of books that take place in different countries, and that's Linda Sue Park. She wrote a book called A Long Walk to Water, which is a true story, and I'm pretty sure that one takes place in Africa. She also wrote a book called A Single Shard, which I think takes place in South Korea, maybe. She herself is Korean American. I haven't read either of those books, but she is a very highly regarded author. So if you're looking for an author that has written a lot of books outside of the United States, Linda Sue Park is someone to check out. Last but not least, we have the challenge of reading a book-to-movie or book-to-screen adaptation. Basically, any classic children's book has a book-to-screen adaptation. Most recently, we have Little Women, which I don't have my copy of Little Women, so I'll just put a picture. I didn't pull it off the shelf. I also didn't pull off the shelf my copy of Anne of Green Gables, another book-to-screen adaptation. I personally am not a fan of Anne with an E. I feel like they took way too many liberties with the story and the characters. I'm fine with it if they weren't taking it and trying to tell the story of Anne of Green Gables, because I don't think they did. They're telling another story. I don't personally like it as an Anne adaptation at all. Like, I have very, very strong negative opinions about it, but it is beautiful to watch. But there's a 1980s CBC adaptation that I adore. So that's the screen adaptation that I would choose for Anne of Green Gables. But if you haven't read Anne of Green Gables and you are new to my channel, welcome. My name's Katie. I love Anne. Anne of Green Gables is my favorite book of all time, and that's all you need to know about me. One of my favorite books growing up, Matilda, also has a screen adaptation that I remember loving when I was younger. So that is another book to screen adaptation. If you haven't read Matilda, another excellent middle grade book. Anything by Roald Dahl. While he does get kind of strange and dark, I do love his books. Matilda is my personal favorite. And then I believe a book to screen adaptation that's coming out this year is The One and Only Ivan, which I mentioned earlier as a book with illustrations in it. So this is a book that fits a couple different categories. So there you go. Finally, another book that I loved when I was young, and it's a tearjerker. I haven't read it in years, but I know that I would still love it, is Bridge to Terabithia by Katherine Paterson. Katherine Paterson is an incredible children's author. Like, I adore her. I adore her as a person. The only book I think I've read by Katherine Paterson is Bridge to Terabithia, but I've read enough about Katherine Paterson, and I've read like other things that she's written, and I've listened to speeches that she's given, etc., etc., etc. I love her. I think she is just chef's kiss, amazing middle grade author. Okay, so now that I've given you some recommendations, let's talk about the books that I plan to read during middle grade March. I did not mention any of these books in the recommendations that I just gave to you. For a book with illustrations, I'm going to read Snow and Rose by Emily Winfield Martin. Emily Winfield Martin is one of my favorite picture book illustrators, and she wrote a retelling of, I think, Snow White and Rose Red. And this is it. This was sent to me in Marigold by Mary Beth Whalen, who is an author that I have read and loved, and I'm friends with her on Instagram. She's just such a dear, and she sent me this book. She saw it and thought of me, and it's filled with these beautiful illustrations because Emily Winfield Martin is an illustrator, and I'm so excited to read this. This is also a retelling, so it works for a book about books or stories, but I've got another book for that one. For a book about books or stories, I have a book called A Kind of Paradise. This is by Amy Rebecca Tan. This is about a little girl named Jamie Bunn who is forced to spend her summer vacation volunteering at her local library. My friend Erin from the Instagram account Erin.Smith read this book and loved it and has been singing its praises. And so I knew I had to read this during middle grade March. For a middle grade mystery, I have Green Glass House by Kate Milford. This is a very popular mystery that is all over Bookstagram, so I'm being kind of basic and picking one that everyone knows about. But I haven't read yet, and I've heard really good things. It's about a little boy named Milo, and one night all of these guests at the inn, Green Glass House is an inn, show up, and he has to unravel the mysteries about all the secrets that these guests have, and it involves the inn, Green Glass House. That's what I got for you. I have 2 books that I'd like to read for a book set in another country. First is Astrid the Unstoppable. This is about a little girl named Astrid who lives in Norway, and she loves to ski. So this was originally published in Norway. It's considered sort of a modern classic, even though it wasn't even written that long ago, but I have a feeling this is going to be along the lines of like an Anne of Green Gables or a Penderwicks, just kind of a really fun, adventurous, gentle story. I cannot wait to read this one. Another book that I can't wait to read, and I've had on my shelf for a long time, is Esperanza Rising by Pam Munoz-Ryan. I have only ever read Echo by Pam Munoz-Ryan, and there's a few books of hers that I'd love to read, and they all have an element of another culture in them. In this one, this is about a little girl named Esperanza who lives in Mexico with her wealthy family, and they are forced to leave. They're forced to immigrate, and they end up in California, I think. Pam Munoz-Ryan based this story on her grandmother's experience. That's what I know about this. Finally, a book-to-screen adaptation. I have seen the movie many times. I watched it and loved it when I was little, but I don't remember ever reading the book. And that's A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. I read and loved The Secret Garden, but I don't think I ever read A Little Princess, and it's time to rectify that. So I'm going to read A Little Princess in March, and I'm really looking forward to it. All right, I have some other books that I'd like to read this month that some of them may fit the challenges, most of them don't fit the challenges, but I'd really like to try and get to them anyway. This feels a little ambitious, although because it's middle grade, I probably will be able to get through at least a few more, even though I have a lot more that I'd like to read. We'll see whether I can get through all of these, my friends. Probably highest on my list is Until Tomorrow, Mr. Marsworth by Sheila O'Connor. This is a favorite middle grade book by many of my friends. I need to read it. It takes place in the 1960s during the Vietnam War, and it's about a little girl. She has gone to live with her grandmother because her parents have died, and she takes up a paper route, and she befriends a recluse named Mr. Marsworth. And this entire book is told in letters between Mr. Marsworth and, I don't remember the little girl's name, Renee. So it's an epistolary novel. I'm super excited to read this. How many times can I say super? At the beginning of the month, I'm going to be doing a buddy read with my friend Kate Howe of a book called Each Little Bird That Sings. This was a National Book Award finalist, and it sounds just like a treasure of a book, and I'm really excited to read this one too. I'm excited to read all of these, so I just need to stop saying that. This is a middle grade Southern fiction story. It's about a little girl named Comfort Snowburger whose family owns a funeral parlor or a funeral home. I think this book deals with loss and friendship and all of the beautiful things that my favorite kinds of middle grade stories deal with, so I'm so excited to read this because I think this is probably going to be a favorite. All right, although I have so many more books that I would really love to get to in middle grade March, I'm just going to mention one more, and that's The Remarkable Journey of Coyote Sunrise by Dan Gemeinhart. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. On Goodreads, there is a Goodreads group called the Mock Newbery, and this is the book from 2019 that won the Mock Newbery. It's about a girl named Coyote who lives on a school bus with her father. I've been meaning to read this since I got it last year. Okay friends, I would ideally like to get to even more books than this, but I'm gonna leave it here and leave some room if I happen to get through all of these for a little bit of mood reading. I hope that I do a better job this year of just picking up middle grade throughout the year rather than just saving it all for middle grade March, because I never get through all the books that I want to get through. Friends, are you excited for middle grade March? Have you posted your TBR videos? Have you posted a recommendations video? Let me know down below what you're most excited to read. Let me know what you're reading for each challenge. Even if you don't make a video, if you are not a booktuber yourself and you just follow me and you're going to be participating, I would love to know what you're reading. I just can't wait, and I want to know all of the great middle grade books that you guys are going to be reading. Don't forget to like this video, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. I would love to be friends with you. Please stick around. I'll talk to you all later. Bye!